Dungeons & Dragons, a tabletop role-playing game popularized by the addition of 5th edition, has numerous expressions, tropes, myths, and the discourse surrounding the game is packed with pieces of advice. Common expressions include sayings like, never split the party, yes and, are you sure you want to do that, and the topic of this video, dying of 1d4 poke damage. In other words, the question is, why do level 1 characters die so easily? The answer to this age-old question is, in a simple sense, math. But let's break this down so it's a bit more clear. Over the course of an adventure or campaign, players will make characters that grow in level. In other words, they grow in power. One would think that, okay, so player characters grow in power, so enemies also need to grow in power. And you would be right, but it's a little more complex than that. The truth is that a tabletop role-playing game should, in theory, just like any other game, raise the stakes as the game goes on. Difficulty should increase. So while the players increase in power, the enemies should increase in power more quickly than the player characters. So mathematically, that means that the threats should grow in power at a greater rate than the growth rate of the players. So as a game master, you take a step back and say, well, if I want the players to struggle in later levels, the first few levels should be a bit easier to get everyone accustomed to playing and finding a party groove. And that's true, but it doesn't stop there. You see, players don't just grow in raw power from one level to the next. They also get new abilities, and new abilities provide new options for the players. And while enemy characters may have options, it's commonly the case that they won't have nearly as many options as the player characters. So, to make up for that increase in options the players get, the enemy characters need to get stronger at an even faster rate than previously mentioned. So right now, we have two fundamental concepts of playing D&D that enforce the need of an enemy to get stronger over the course of a campaign faster than the player characters. That's not even the end of it either. As you level up and accumulate more abilities, you accumulate more options and resources. More options and resources mean that the results of a situation can be more granular. Think of it this way. If I have a grand total of 10 options, then 10 possible outcomes can happen. Some of those options will be considered by the player to be successful, and some will be considered by the player as a failure. Let's say that 7 of those options result in success. Well, as the character levels up and gains more options, their options after some time might shoot up to, say, 100. If you truly want to have a well-paced difficulty, if you really want the game to get harder as it goes on, then you'll want at least 30 of those choices to result in some sort of interpretive failure. This is mathematically required if you want to ensure that the success rate is 70% or lower based on the success rate significantly earlier on in the campaign, which was also 70%. And that's a challenge. That's extremely difficult for a game master to manage. There's so much math behind every decision that determining the true success rate is nigh impossible. Well, this isn't a problem, right? We just need to make the enemies weaker at lower levels, right? Well, yes, definitely, but I would be willing to wager that you couldn't possibly make an encounter easy enough to be worthy of a level 1 encounter while maintaining the balance curve. Let me demonstrate what I mean with an example. I know different game masters will determine maximum health in different ways, but let's just assume we use this method as a default. Your maximum health is equal to your hit die rolled a number of times equal to your level, plus your constitution modifier also multiplied by your level. In fact, the math that goes into why characters die so easily at level 1 is the entire reason why game masters devise new ways to determine health. So back to the example. Let's assume your character has a hit die of a d6, or a 6-sided die, and a constitution modifier of 0. And let's just assume, for the sake of consistency, that the character rolled the same number for their health increase every single time. Let's use the example of rolling a 6 every time. You could rearrange this scenario such that the character had a d10 hit die instead and chose to take the average max health increase instead of rolling. Either way, here's what the character's max health looks like in both cases. Their health is 6 at level 1 and 12 at level 2. And using the base rules for a grueling campaign, this is actually the expectation, that you will have twice as much health at level 2 over level 1. Let's assume a team of player characters goes up against an opponent at level 1 that deals 1d6 damage every time it hits your character, and at level 2, that character goes up against an opponent that deals 2d6 with every hit. At first glance, this seems fair. From case 1 to case 2, you have twice as much health, but take twice as much damage from an attack. And it's true that, on average, your character will take twice as much damage in case 2. However, what's important is not the average. What's important is to understand the scenarios that can possibly happen. Let's look at the chances of your character going unconscious in one hit. So in both cases, the enemy character has some chance to hit. Regardless of the case, the chance of landing a hit is the same. There are no changes to bonuses to hit or armor class. So the enemy character is going to hit you on its first attack with the same probability. But the situations in which your character goes unconscious in the first case is if the enemy hits you and rolls a 6 on their damage. That has a 1/6 chance of happening. But in case 2, assuming the enemy hits, the situation in which you go unconscious is if they roll 2 6s, one on each of their 6-sided dice. That means that your character has 6 times the probability of going unconscious in case 1 over case 2, even assuming that they deal twice as much damage in the second scenario. But how could that be? Well, in this case, it's because of the method by which I determined your maximum health. Let's change the example. Let's take the exact same example, except in case 1 your max health is 5, and in case 2 your max health is 10. So now your character can go unconscious if the opponent rolls a 5 or 6, or a 1/3 chance of going unconscious in case 1. In the second case, the enemy needs to roll a 10, 11, or 12 with 2d6, which has a 1/6 chance of happening. Even now, your character still has twice the chance of going unconscious in case 1 over case 2. So level 2 is still safer. But that doesn't make sense, does it? The key is that in case 2, we rolled more dice. You see, if you roll more dice and take the sum, the chances of getting middle numbers is much higher than high or low numbers. Assuming we played a greater amount of rounds while still in combat, the chances of going unconscious would eventually equalize, since in the second case we get more middle numbers more steadily. In fact, this can be generalized as we get more and more health and more dice to roll. The chances of going unconscious in one hit or just a few hits get shrunk, while the chances of dealing moderate, consistent damage increases. So let's try solving this problem by changing the die type rather than changing the amount of dice we roll. Let's compare case 1 to case 2, except in case 2, the enemy is rolling a d12 instead of 2d6. So in case 1, assuming you get hit and have 6 health, your chances of going unconscious against an enemy dealing 1d6 damage is still 1/6. Now in case 2, with 12 health, the chances of rolling a 12 on a d12 and causing you to go unconscious is 1/12. Look at that, you're still twice as likely to go unconscious in case 1 over case 2. Well, let's tick the health down to 5 and 10 apiece. So now in case 1, you have a 1/3 chance of going unconscious, assuming the attack hits, and in case 2, the chances of rolling a 10, 11, or 12 are 1/4. It's still worse in case 1. This can be generalized for any n-sided die. Your chances of rolling m, which is a number between 1 and n, is 1 divided by n. So the chances of rolling m or higher would be 1 divided by n, multiplied by n minus m plus 1, or 1 minus m over n plus 1 divided by n. Compare this to a 2n-sided die, where your chances of rolling 2m or higher would be 1 divided by 2n multiplied by 2n minus 2m plus 1, or 1 minus m divided by n plus 1 divided by 2n. Since n must be positive, 1 minus m divided by n plus 1 over n must be greater than or equal to 1 minus m divided by n plus 1 divided by 2n. So the chances of going unconscious in one hit in case 1 must necessarily be greater than or equal to the chances of going unconscious in one hit in case 2, regardless of your starting health at level 1. So what does this mean for level 1 D&D players? Well, since all the numbers tend to be very small, the amount of dice rolled for damage also tend to be very small. However, as you roll more dice, the more average the numbers tend to be. This makes the chances of rolling extremes much smaller as you continue into later levels, providing the feeling of constant pressure, but rarely a feeling of being killed in one hit, unless the Game Master designed the encounter specifically to cause one-hit kills. I often tell players that there are 2 primary ways your character will die. The first is if you make enough sufficiently stupid decisions. The second situation is if luck is not on your side, and let me tell you, luck is not on your side more often at low levels. As counterintuitive as this sounds, as a starting Game Master, you should not start your players at level 1. You should either start your players around level 3, or create your own system for maximum health that doesn't cause level 2 to quite literally give you twice as much health as level 1. Just expect that if you go for a level 1 campaign, to not throw anything at the players that you could even imagine going poorly for them. Level 1 doesn't make any narrative sense either. Why would an elf that's been alive for hundreds of years grow in strength twofold overnight? This isn't an attempt to bash the concept of level 1 in D&D, rather this is just a warning to steer clear of the common pitfalls that arrive as a result of the myth that your players need to or should start at level 1. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.